How much difference do you think that the position you sit in your room will make to the sound that you're hearing? The answer is it can make a massive difference. I upgraded my audio interface to an RME one, which means I can run the Sonarworks room correction on there. But before I do that, I want to make sure that the room is in the best possible state so that the room correction is just doing that little bit. So I started by making sure that I had my desk and, more importantly, my seat in the correct position. So I did what's called a walking mic test, which means taking measurements at various positions from front to back of the room. So I pushed the desk all the way up to the wall, put some tape on the floor, put my measurement mic up and took numerous readings. This is what they look like. This graph represents the frequency response of the space at the point in time that I started. So if we make a line at 85, we can see that we have dips going down to 77, so that's 8 dBs down, and then we have peaks at 91, so that's 6 dBs up. So plus or minus 6 or 7 decibels from a flat line. This is the bit that's been the most confusing to me, this big low-mid peak. In my case, what I thought I would do would be a zero-cost exercise first. Am I actually sitting in the best possible space in the room? In the very low end, the listening position didn't seem to make a great deal of difference. If you look, all of these lines are fairly consistent. These two are the ones, in fact this one is the one that I was most intrigued by, because the difference between this bottom orange curve and this top curve, nearly 10 decibels. So by moving my chair, I could have been sat in a position where I had a 10 decibel worse dip. They're 50 centimeters apart, which doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But look at the difference. So what have I done? Well, surprise, surprise, I decided to move my chair to this position. I was there. I also did left and right measurements. Let's look at the difference between the left and the right speakers. The orange curve is my left speaker, the blue curve is my right speaker. So actually, the blue curve isn't exhibiting anywhere near as much of a dip. Let's try a different position then. So let's go a little bit further forwards. The left is still worse than the right with the dip. And again, the left is still worse than the right. What I learnt from this is that I've got a problem with symmetry, even though the room is, I thought, symmetrical in terms of the way the front wall is built with the speakers mounted in it. What I learnt from the readings is that there is a null on the left speaker only around 150 Hz, a very narrow null, and it isn't present on the right speaker or on the right side of the room. I've not been able to figure out exactly what it is yet, but I carried out a range of experiments to see if I could get rid of it. Once I'd noticed that 150 Hz null, I got down a little rabbit hole trying to fix it. I'd already established that it was at its least problematic at a particular point here from the wall, which is where my new mix position is. And I thought it might be related to a floor bounce, so the sound bouncing from the speaker to the floor and back up to my ear. So I tried putting some absorption, basically a sofa cushion, on the floor. It actually made it worse, so that's interesting. So it's definitely some kind of cancellation thing going on. I then tried holding the cushion up in the air, and that actually made it slightly better. As part of all this, I thought, well, if I can help absorb it more, then that's the best thing I can do. For years, I've had a cupboard between my speakers in the wall there. But now that my mix position, and therefore my desk, is closer to the wall, I couldn't actually use the cupboard. So what I decided to do was to rip the cupboard out and fill that whole cavity, that whole space, with more absorption. And the reason for that was to try and soak up some more reflections, some more standing waves in the room, in an effort to get that 150 Hz null to cancel a bit. Has it worked? No. That dip has got slightly worse. I mean, we're talking a decibel. That one's got slightly worse. So I was wrong that changing out the cupboard for a load more absorption was going to solve my problem. So where I am now is I found the best position to sit in the space according to the way everything else is laid out. I know that I've got a 150 Hz null to do with the left speaker or the left side of the room. I don't know what's caused it. Taking out the cupboard hasn't helped. I can carry out some more experiments, but what I've done is I've reached out to an acoustics consultant to ask some questions, get a consultation, because I don't want to do any more random stuff that isn't necessarily making it better. Because in some ways, taking out that cupboard has actually made it look worse on the readings, which is concerning. So for now, I've got a more settled curve because of where I'm sitting, and I'm going to run the Sonarworks Sound ID anyway. But what I'm pretty sure of is it can't fix that 150 Hz null because it's to do with a cancellation, I'm sure, of two frequencies. I tried using the room EQ filters that are on the RME interface to correct the response of the room using the settings that REW proposed, and that's what came out. Look at the difference. I then took a trial of Sonarworks to see what that would do, and that is the REW measurement after Sonarworks. So Sonarworks definitely improved. What's interesting is that at first glance, the EQ curve that REW suggested to put into the RME interface produced a better result than Sonarworks. But the problem is that was just in this one position. So that's the EQ curve that I'm running on the RME. Let's see how that compares to the EQ curve Sonarworks wanted to run. So that's the same. That's not there on the Sonarworks one. And the theory is that Sonarworks is putting an average in place that will work over a bigger environment. So to test this hypothesis, I moved the mic around. So I started by doing some left-right movements, and in the critical area, which is sort of 300 Hertz and below, I didn't really notice any difference. What about going forwards and backwards? Now that's a problem. So whatever EQ move that was, not good. Let's compare the same then. That is forwards by 30 centimeters with Sonarworks, and that's forwards by 30 centimeters with the EQ. Okay, what about going backwards? That's backwards with Sonarworks, that's backwards with the EQ. It's less extreme. Sonarworks is more smooth. The Sonarworks curve is actually more useful because it's an average. So what I can do is try and model that on the RME room EQ, which means just taking out some of the boosts and some of the dips that I had applied there. And that'll get me a consistent sound in more than one place. I've talked to an acoustics consultant. Firstly, he said that a professional room is one where you've got a frequency response that's within plus or minus 3 decibels of the flat line. And mine isn't a million miles away from that at the moment, but for that 130, 150 Hertz dip. And he said that could be caused by a longitudinal room mode, perhaps. Could be something to do with SBIR. It could be something on this side wall specifically. It's only on the left speaker that I'm hearing the problem. And that makes sense because directly behind where the camera is now, there's a window. And there isn't a window on this side, there's just that reflective panel. He also underlined my thinking, which is that Sonarworks, Corrective EQ, they're the last step. You shouldn't use them first. You should absolutely try and figure out things like speaker position, chair position, symmetry, and any acoustic treatment that you can do. That's always the first thing. You can't just turn up the gain at that frequency and hope that that null goes away, because in some cases it'll just make it worse. So my next steps are to try some absorption, something around that side to see if I can reduce that null. I'm going to extend those soffit walls to try and reduce the SBIR. I'm also going to invest in the matching sub that goes with my monitors, partly to help make sure that I've got full representation at the bottom of the frequency response, but also because I can move that where I can't move my speakers, so I might be able to move that to a place that's giving me a better low end. And the last reason is Neumann have their own version of room correction, so that will be super interesting. So I'm going to buy that pretty soon. But I'm pretty happy with where I've got to. It's a good sounding room. I can just make it a little bit better.